Chairman Mandeville, State Admin Committee. My name is David Herbst, Herbst. I'm with Americans for Prosperity, Montana. So I'm going to try to add some balance to this conversation, being the only opponent. I will try not to make up for that with extra time and be sensitive to that. So in the spirit of engagement of ideas, I'd like to provide some criticism of the content and the philosophical perspective in House Resolution 2. And I recommend that you oppose passage. Specifically from my background as somebody who takes ideas very seriously, I'd like to declare first my biases, what I think about when it comes to government. And I'd like to, see what you think. I think everyone should agree. My first principle of government, at least one of them, is to include the perspective that the state can either be an enabler of someone's self-actualization in life. It could be something that helps someone get to the place where they need to be, to actualize their potential, or it can be a barrier. It could be one of those two things. And I think most people would be on board so far. And I think maybe the disagreement that we often have about government and the perspective of AFP's mission is that oftentimes there's no one to represent the places where government is a barrier and it needs to get out of the way. This is the concept of liberty as classically understood by liberals and conservatives and libertarians for a very long time. In America, we've decided that the government doesn't have a proper role in regulating speech, except in extreme circumstances, like when imminent danger or actual violence. I think where we likely agree on this point is that it's wrong for government to establish a constitutional order that says some people have a right to free speech, while others don't. But I'm afraid that's what this resolution declares. It says if you organize yourself voluntarily as a corporation, you no longer have certain rights. But the other forms of voluntary association do have those rights. Another way to put that criticism is that I agree with the bill's sponsor. Corporations aren't people, not literally. But the people who are in those corporations don't lose their rights because they are a group of people. After all, that's what the legal term of art means in the first place. By the same standard, neither are unions people, nor are trade associations, nor are churches, nor are any group of people. So there are two errors here. One that we would call the philosophy or composition fallacy. It's incumbent on the sponsors and the supporters to describe why individuals have a right to free speech. But those same people don't have a right when they declare to do so as a voluntary organization known as a corporation. Two, the exception that H.R. 2 makes to our constitutional rights are not applied equally. Rather, that the resolution isolates corporations as a bad means of organizing a group of individuals, but doesn't apply the same logic to unions, nonprofits, churches, clubs, and other forms of those kind of voluntary associations. Once again, it is incumbent on the supporters to explain why some voluntary organizations have rights and others don't. And I do want to address, a lot was said about money and donations, relationship between money and donations, and I do want to respond to that because I think it's a difficult issue to navigate. Specifically, I want to give you some historical anecdotes and examples that might shed some light on the way you might approach this, and maybe cause some folks that are skeptical of my position on this to rethink. And I also, and I don't have a lot of good examples. So the best example I have, I want to make sure it's very clear up front that it's kind of a harsh example. And it, of course, is not a comment on the sponsor or any of the supporters. This is no disrespect to anybody on the other side of the issue from me. We as the American people who believe in the capacity of the individual to achieve their potential regardless of race fought a system known as Jim Crow by communicating an idea that the government and culture of the South did not want to hear at the time. It was an unpopular opinion, and the censorship powers of government were brought to bear against that point of view. That was an abuse of power. It was wrong then, and censorship of donations is wrong now. But the dignity of the individual triumphed, and the point of view groups such as the ACLU and the NAACP were allowed to work the things that they did to advance civil liberty. The unpopular speech of MLK and others that swayed the hearts of a nation and convinced people that there was a problem and created the conditions for the policy solutions to those problems were great men and women who stood up and said something, and that's a good thing. We need courageous people like that. But the untold story is behind those organizations and people were many, many anonymous donors who made those movements possible. We know this because of the NAACP versus Alabama, and if you want to look at the court history, you should definitely start there. A case where it was argued that without incorporating in Alabama specifically, the NAACP was not in compliance with state law, and therefore the NAACP couldn't operate in Alabama, and must therefore leave or do something else so they can stay, hand over their donor lists. The NAACP argued that they had a right to protect the anonymity of their donors, and everyone knew that the state of Alabama was up to, of course. In a landmark Supreme Court case, we as the American people passed a test, and free speech as an act of donating with one's money was protected. That's a good thing and something to be celebrated. This is an institution that is unique here, and we should protect it. It was protected for the sake of speech that everyone agreed. It wasn't protected for the sake of speech that everyone already agrees with, right? It's protected for speech that was unpopular at the time, such as the case of Brendan Ike. He's the Firefox CEO. So you're saying, yeah, that's just the Jim Crow South. David, I get you, but it's different now. The Firefox CEO, who gave to proposition opposing gay marriage in California in 2008, a donor list that was acquired by the government was accidentally leaked to the public in 2014. When the donor list was made public, his company, the company they had sacrificed so much for, the hundreds of employees he gave his livelihoods to, the family that he has, the embarrassment that he suffered, all for having the wrong opinions in 2014, for having the same opinion as Hillary Clinton and Barack Obama in 2008. He lost all of that because he was donating. And the reason why he donated anonymously in the first place was to protect those people and to protect his reputation. Because protected free speech of that kind, people do that for reasons, not for no reason. He created tremendous value for society. He invented JavaScript, a backbone of the internet. The stakes are not the same as they were for Jim Crow, but they're still stakes, real ones, for men and women who donate to public speech about important issues. And what we don't want to do is chill that. No matter what the income level is, we don't want to stop people from saying, man, I want to donate to this group, but there could be social consequences if I don't. Because I believe in their speech and I want them to do what they're doing. What America needs is more speech, not less. When the argument is made that the most important component of any speech is the identity of the arguer, we've lost something. We have a rich political tradition of anonymous speech too. See the Federalist and Anti-Federalist papers. See the writings of Benjamin Franklin and George Washington, who all used pseudonyms. We only know that now is because we did the historical research, but at the time they didn't know who they were. They did that for reasons, real reasons, because the identity of the arguer shouldn't matter. It should be the brand. You come up here and talk to me, and I'm willing to be up here and take an unpopular position and say, I think this is wrong, right? And I get paid to do that. I'm lucky. I'm extremely lucky to have the job I do. But not everyone's in that position. Not everyone is here today that supports my position, and I'm here to represent them. I believe in an America where people who want to donate to causes they believe in can do so without fear of reprisals, where individuals can organize as they wish and speak as they wish as long as it harms no one. Thank you for this opportunity to weigh in, and I'll be here for questions.
Thank you. Are there further opponents? Further opponents? Further opponents? Are there informational witnesses? Informational witnesses? Any informational witnesses? Questions from the committee? Questions from the committee? Representative Garner.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, for Mr. Herbst.
Mr. Herbst.
Mr. Chair, Representative Garner.
Mr. Chair, Mr. Herbst, first I want to say, to preface my question, I appreciate that you have the opportunity to be here today and take an unpopular position, and so I know your personal background a little bit, and I appreciate that you have the courage to be the person in the room that takes the opposite position. But kind of to your point, the resolution here suggests that the people of Montana, right, the vast majority of people in Montana have spoken and said, this is what we want. What is wrong with those people organizing for the purpose of saying that, this is our expectation of our government?
Sure. I'll try to address that in two ways.
Through
One,
the chair, please.
oh, please, Chairman Mandeville, if you mind. That threw me off. One, popularity is a thing to consider, and I think democracy works by popularity, but it doesn't determine right, doesn't determine morality. Some things are minority positions and are still right. Number two, I support the right of anyone to organize to oppose me. We often, it's funny because it's about corporate personhood. Our biggest issue this legislative session, on top of like the work we're doing on CJR reform, a lot of the stuff we engage is on corporate welfare because we disagree with it. We had the position we do on film tax credits because we disagree with corporate welfare. But we support the right of corporations to be able to say, film companies to be able to say, we think we should deserve a tax credit. They have a right, just like everyone else does, to speech. So, and I feel the same way about people who are saying, we want to have this conversation about money in politics and corporate personhood too. So I support their right to engage like that.
Mr. Chair, I have a question for Mr. Herbst, please.
Mr. Herbst.
Mr. Chair, Mr. Herbst, I believe all of us are sick of all the negative ads that we see and hear in campaign season. But I'm wondering if this bill will take care of that problem. As I recall, most of the information that we get comes from a PAC or a political party. I don't really remember a corporation. So can you help me with that, please?
So the different people are regulated differently based upon their what they're running for. There's also different players that can also act during that time. So, for example, if you're a federal candidate and you go to a PAC for Walmart or something like that, they can donate $2,500 to you as a PAC. That's their limit. That's what they can do as a candidate. Now, Walmart can also, as a PAC, do speech, meaning they can put out a mailer or a TV ad saying Walmart's awesome and support our political point of view. They can also donate to a nonprofit, of which they support the point of view on. And that nonprofit can then do speech, right? There are limits to that. IRS limits that limit that to certain kinds of speech, right? So we already regulate this pretty heavily, especially on the federal level, even more so on the state level, where we're saying if you're a nonprofit, you can do speech, but you can't directly advocate for the election or defeat of a candidate. So, for example, if they say you should support Walmart, we support our agenda, but don't vote for Representative Webb or vote for Representative Webb. That last part, that would be a problem. That would actually put them in a different IRS category and therefore have donor disclosure. So what they do often is educate the public about their point of view. That's what we do at Americans for Prosperity. Our point of view, of course, affects you guys. What you guys do. We are up here lobbying and advancing policy alongside of you, sometimes supporting, sometimes opposing a bill. And our job is to tell the public about that and to summarize that as best we can, because it's a complex, if you guys face it, it's a complex problem. How do you tell everyday people about the issues and the nuance of what we face up here on the Capitol? And our only difference is we don't do it from the point of view of, as representatives, our point of view is philosophical. We want a society defined by mutual benefit and equal rights. Our job is to make that pervasive across all the societies all the institutions of society, whether that's education, government, nonprofits. So, and I hope that's getting to there to answering your question. I'm not trying to ramble, but it's people don't like the negative mailers. I understand that. The political scientist in me says it's because they're effective, but that's not just us. I mean, that's not just 501c3s or C4s. That's also, campaigns, PACs, things like that, who are regulated very differently. At least one of the criticisms of this is the bill doesn't really differentiate between the diverse, and I think a lot of the supporters' testimony didn't do a very good job about laying out the difference between a corporate PAC doing a donation, a corporation doing a donation, etc. So, for example, if a corporate PAC if a corporation wants to start a PAC, the board gets together, they do a vote, they put together a PAC based upon the rules of the contract of the corporation. That PAC then has a governing structure that then, fulfills the mission that the corporation originally endowed it with. Whether that's to defend themselves for government or whatever. Does that make sense? Am I making that clear? I hope I'm being helpful.
Follow-up question, please.
Representative Webb.
Mr. Chair, Mr. Herbst, so then are you saying that if this resolution would to go through and we have a constitutional amendment, PACs would no longer be able to do their advertising that they did?
I don't know.
Through the chair, please.
Oh, sorry, Chairman Mandelbaum, I'm not sure. I'm not, once again, not a constitutional lawyer and definitely not a campaign finance lawyer. I'm here mostly to oppose the philosophy that's really driving this and to try to bring a different perspective in on that. I'm not sure exactly what the policy outcome would be in this case, but I could do some research and email you or something.
Okay, that would be great.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr.
Thank
Chair.
you.
Thank you, Mr. Herbst.